The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
He once was lost, but now apparently is found. Joe Biden is resurrected from the dead. Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. The former vice president taken to the figurative middle of nowhere and left for dead just 1 week ago after the widely predicted stumbles, bumbles, gaffes, memory lapses, and 3 straight shellackings to begin the Democratic presidential race turns into Lazarus on Super Tuesday, rising from the political dead. We will cover this dramatic turnaround in the race for the Democratic nomination from multiple angles, including how the Democratic establishment orchestrated this resuscitation, whether Bernie Sanders can rebound from a bad night with 6 more states voting this Tuesday, and whether Biden is really any kind of answer to the Democrats' many problems. Plus, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza jumps on board for Talkin' Liberty, featuring talk of bump stocks, abortion, drones, and compelled speech.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
Well, none of us were immune from the temptation to write off Joe Biden, and why wouldn't we write him off? He predictably performed like the old man he is in multiple debates, has a lot of splaining to do about his son and Ukraine and corruption, kept making embarrassing gaffes, changed positions he held his whole life on multiple issues to pander to progressives, never articulated a message other than a return to the good old days when he and Obama and Hillary were large and in charge. And yet, with a figurative gun to their heads, i.e. no other moderates left except the uniquely dislikable billionaire Mike Bloomberg, after Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar mysteriously dropped out right before Super Tuesday, and thus the genuine threat of an avowed socialist at the top of their ticket, Democrat voters flocked to old Uncle Joe on Super Tuesday. The voters quickly forgot the gaffes and stumbles and memory lapses, but then in probably the biggest moment of his political career, in the first words of his victory speech, we were all reminded.
By the way, this is my little sister Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh no, you switched on me. This is my wife, this is my sister. They switched on me.
Wife, sister, whatever. You can put a bonnet on a warthog and say great things about the warthog and tell people to ignore what their lying eyes see in that warthog, but in the end, it's still a warthog. So now Biden is set to try and run the table in the 6 states that vote on Tuesday, touting his supposedly moderate positions, which make him more electable than Moscow Bernie. It's always instructive to hear what a candidate says in the flush of victory. So listen to what the moderate Biden promised on Tuesday night.
A bold vision. We invest billions of dollars to find, and I promise you, cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. Standing up to and beating the NRA and the gun manufacturers. And leading the world to take on the existential threat of climate change. I'm going to start by rejoining an outfit I helped put together, the Paris Climate Accord, where we triple funding for low-income school districts, providing raises for teachers, free community college, and significant reduction in the cost of going to college and your student debt.
Remember that Biden has already said he's coming after the gun manufacturers, wants people to be able to sue them and ultimately shut them down. But the news just kept on getting better for Biden. The day after Super Tuesday, Bloomberg and the once front-running but then floundering Elizabeth Warren bowed out of the race, making it a head-to-head race between Bernie's socialism and Biden's nostalgia for the salad days of him and Obama and Clinton. And after a rough night Tuesday, Bernie drew sharp contrasts while strangely deciding not to use Biden's name.
One of us in this race led the opposition to the war in Iraq. You're looking at him. Another candidate voted for the war in Iraq. One of us has spent his entire life fighting against cuts in Social Security, wanting to expand Social Security. Another candidate has been on the floor of the Senate calling for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Veterans Program. One of us led the opposition to disastrous trade agreements which cost us millions of good-paying jobs. And another candidate voted for disastrous trade agreements.
So there's how Bernie will try and go after Biden and resuscitate his campaign, depicting Biden as a stooge, a tool of the political establishment, big corporations, the military-industrial complex. But no matter what happens from here, Biden will always owe a debt of gratitude to the man widely credited with resurrecting Biden's campaign, the widely respected, grizzled veteran Congressman James Clyburn, who endorsed Biden just before the South Carolina primary, which began Biden's run. And Clyburn said he waited to endorse Biden because of a couple of fundamental problems with the Biden campaign.
I thought that fundraising was lagging and it needed to be more professionalized. And I think these wins sort of professionalized the fundraising, because within 24 hours, it looks like more than $10 million was raised. And I also thought that we needed to have speech making more feeling than just laying out policy. He is just a good guy. And I said when I made my endorsement, I know Joe, we know Joe, but most importantly, Joe knows us. But people were not feeling it. They heard his proposals. They liked them. They want him to build on Obamacare, not rip it away. But they were not feeling him. So I wanted speech making to be more feeling.
So apparently they're feeling it now. But will they, now that the Klieg lights turn back on Uncle Joe? Meanwhile, President Trump looks on with bemusement as the Democrats fight amongst themselves. He keeps holding his signature rallies all over the country, and he doesn't need long to lay out his campaign message.
Our country is stronger than ever before. Jobs are booming in our country. Incomes are soaring. Poverty is plummeting. Confidence is surging. And every day for me and for you, it's promises made, promises kept. Every day.
So this man of many words needs few words to lay out his case for re-election. And the case becomes all the easier when you've got the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer out in front of the Supreme Court threatening the two justices appointed by Trump if they deliver a ruling he and his fellow pro-abortionists don't like on an abortion case pending before the High Court now. That provoked a rare rebuke from Chief Justice John Roberts and a Schumer apology on the floor of the Senate the next day. We'll discuss this more with Scott Cosenza later on in Talkin' Liberty.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
We close with one of the oddest turn of events this week and a product of the toxic political climate we find ourselves in. The day before Super Tuesday, Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel opined on the Democratic primary on the Fox News channel, offering the same opinions as many other observers. But the normally even-tempered, professional, quintessential Democratic insider and former DNC chair Donna Brazile went off on her.
First of all, I want to talk to my Republicans. First of all, stay the hell out of our race. Stay the hell out of our race. I get sick and tired of listening to Republicans tell me and the Democrats about our process. And for people to use Russian talking points to sow division among Americans, that is stupid. So, Ronna, go to hell.
Go to hell. The Donna and Ronna show, soon to be playing again at a theater near you. Quick break, and then we'll be back to drill down on the orchestrated resuscitation of Joe Biden.
Where can you find honest political commentary with sobering analysis, accountability, deconstructing threats to our liberty, and boldly reporting the truth? Subscribe to LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where facts matter.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The verdict delivered by Democratic voters on Super Tuesday almost certainly has a lot more to do with who they don't want at the top of their ticket than who they do. Faced with the prospect or specter of front-running socialist Bernie Sanders leaving the rest of the Democratic presidential field in the dust, voters opted to cling to a somehow reassuring figure with deep flaws but a familiar face. To be sure, folks, this was a cry for help. Consider that unlike Bernie and his army of small donors and the billionaire Bloomberg's bottomless bank account, Joe Biden was running on financial fumes just days before Super Tuesday. Even a big victory in South Carolina over the weekend didn't provide sufficient time for him to capitalize with a fundraising bonanza and a corresponding ad campaign. Very few ads went up in the states on Super Tuesday, and yet a critical mass of voters, desperate to avoid the ripe possibility of a self-proclaimed socialist representing them on the ballot, decided to cling to a candidate who had until just days before been almost a joke. The field, which included a record-shattering 29 candidates at one time or another, conveniently narrowed just in time for the former vice president to profit immeasurably, swooping in and feeding off the carcasses of two candidates considered moderate by current Democratic standards who suddenly withdrew just days before voters went to the polls in 14 states. In addition to being the beneficiary of this transparent last-minute establishment consolidation or conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, designed to cull the herd, Biden got the added bonus of spontaneous combustion by yet another relative moderate, deep-pocketed newbie, Mike Bloomberg, on the same debate stage where Biden delivered a defiant, if typically error-filled, performance in the latest debate. Bloomberg spent some $500 million, which bought him an average of about 12% across the board on Super Tuesday, a princely sum to be sure, but not enough to keep him in the race. He withdrew the day after Super Tuesday, and then so did Elizabeth Warren, and that leaves no safety net for the Democrats if Biden stumbles again, which of course remains as live a possibility as a resurgence by Bernie. Now, when you consider the wild swings in recent polls and the phoenix-like rise of Biden from the ashes of 3 humiliating beatdowns in February, you quickly understand that Democrat voters have obviously been dissatisfied with their options, But now, with the shouting over and more than a third of their delegates up for grabs, they were being painted into a corner on the biggest single day of their electoral season, one that could well shape the very future of their party. The Democratic faithful were left with a choice of two men who aren't even Democrats, a socialist, almost communist, and a soulless wooden money machine, plus a scolding schoolmarm and old Uncle Joe. Now, it seems almost certain that the Democratic power brokers made Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar what we might call an offer they couldn't refuse, with a clear message. Pete, Amy, you've had a nice little run here, but if you stay in this race and continue to siphon votes away from our chosen vessel, the former vice president, your future in this party could become very cloudy. But jump on board. Be a team player, give a speech saying you think Lunch Bucket Joe would make a terrific president, and we will look upon you and your still promising political career with favor. The voters responded in kind, as if it was a political version of hands up, don't shoot. Okay, we'll put a figurative bonnet on that warthog and pull the lever for 1% Joe. Do we really have any other choice at this point? So Bernie won the first 3 contests, Biden 11 of the next 15, and 6 more states are set to vote this coming Tuesday. Remember that even with a sweep of 10 states on Super Tuesday, including every large state except California and Colorado, Biden still possesses less than a quarter of the almost 2,000 delegates needed to clinch the nomination. Given the twists and turns we've already witnessed in this race, which attracted a cattle car of wannabes, voters in the 32 states who've yet to weigh in will now watch as the spotlight turns back to the immediate past vice president and the scrutiny which led to his rapid decline in January and February resumes afresh. Expect to hear discussions restart about Biden's famous stumbles and gaffes and memory lapses, plus, of course, the alleged corruption revolving around Hunter Biden and the millions he received from a Ukrainian company while his father fired the prosecutor investigating that company. Backed into a corner like a collective wounded animal, Democrats responded by returning to the devil they know, hoping against hope that their chosen vessel can first remove the stench of socialism from atop their party and then somehow overcome his own ineptitude. But if Joe Biden fails to justify the conditional seal of approval the voters gifted him on Super Tuesday, they will still have enough time to pull another 180-degree turn and continue their search for someone, anyone, who can present a respectable image for their embattled, war-torn party. So now that it's down to a two-way race between 2 almost 80-year-old white men in this party of diversity, we'll bring on LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaeffer to discuss whether Democrats should celebrate or rue the day when Joe Biden rose from the dead.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So we've been discussing how the real winner on Super Tuesday was not so much Joe Biden. He's the same hapless, often embarrassing yet amiable person he was before, but the Democratic political establishment, which was backed into a corner and came out swinging, driving out the moderate competition right before Super Tuesday and getting them to sing Kumbaya and treat Joe Biden like something nobody saw him as just a few days before. joining us to analyze whether this establishment move is going to work or not, whether Biden is likely to maintain his momentum or not, and whether Bernie is toast or not, is LibertyNation.com's incisive, outspoken political columnist Joe Schaeffer. Hello, Joe.
Good afternoon, Tim.
Pleasure to have you back. It always is. So I'm going to ask you if you can admit to having a kind of grudging admiration for a Democratic establishment that couldn't even count votes in Iowa, getting it together enough to raise the flag about stopping Bernie with the only remaining vessel they had, Joe Biden, and getting everyone to salute. Was it not well played for what they were intent on achieving?
I guess you have to give it to them. I didn't think they could pull this off, and it really backs up in a weird way everything they've done since Trump took office in 2017. They scared the hell out of everyone apparently in the Democratic Party. Trump is this existential threat to liberty, Russia, Mueller probe, everything. It made them look horrible, yet here they are scaring all their voters into voting for this dinosaur of the uniparty that everybody cannot wait to see go away. That they did that is really a testament to what we all thought was a fading, dying political establishment.
So will the establishment live to regret their plot to take down Bernie, or did they really have no other choice but to throw in all their chips on the table for Joe Biden?
Yeah, I don't think they had any choice. It's at this point with them, it's after me the deluge. They just want to hold on to power for as long as they can. Another day in the saddle is a good day for them. Their time is marked. I think they realize it. And we saw this even with Nancy Pelosi making her deals with AOC to hold on to her speakership for just a little bit longer. That's what's going on here. So when you look at it that way, yeah, they had no choice and they got what they want. They are going to keep their seats at the trough for another couple years, 4 years. If Joe Biden is the nominee, it's a big victory for them.
Now, up to this point, Joe Biden has been hidden somewhat in a large field on the debate stage. But now, with Elizabeth Warren dropping out, Mike Bloomberg dropping out, and Tulsi Gabbard, the only one officially in the field, she won't be in the debate, he can no longer hide in a big field where his gaffes aren't as pronounced. So what are your expectations in the next debate coming up this week between Bernie and Biden?
Well, it really should be perfect for Bernie, but I think what's gone on here shows that Bernie has not been running a particularly fantastic campaign. He's been too caught up in identity politics and talking about climate change, things like that, way too much. I'm not pandering, but bowing to the progressive, the social left much more than focusing on his class ideas. That is what really got him where he is. So this rise of Biden in many ways is a slam at Bernie's campaign. I guess it wasn't this progressive, inevitable snowball turning into an avalanche that he would like it to project to be. How can you not beat Joe Biden going into Super Tuesday? The guy can't even speak a complete sentence at times. If you really have this inevitable movement, so the flaws in this Sanders movement have been exposed here. He's got to right the ship. He should be able to do it, but he never really should have been put in this situation in the first place. He's basically the equivalent of Trump with Jeb Bush, but Jeb Bush rolling Donald Trump. That's how Bernie looks right now, and he's got to change that narrative really fast.
And Bernie has to learn how to fight. I mean, famously in 2016, when he got on the debate stage with Hillary Clinton, and said, I don't want to hear any more about your damn emails. He was conceding an issue that he needed in order to overtake the heavy favorite. Now, we'll see whether he goes hard after Biden or not. He's going to need to do that. But, Joe, I mean, a party preaching diversity has narrowed its field of 29 candidates down to 2. Both white men, 78 and 77 years old. I remember when they said Reagan was too old to be president, and he was 79 when he left the White House.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate concern. It is a serious concern, especially when you look at what's going on. It's not just the age, it's how are they holding up. Bernie Sanders had a heart attack in early October. He's not releasing a lot of medical information on that. And he didn't know Michael Bloomberg had dropped out for several hours after the rest of the country knew. You're one of the 3 guys who could be president of the United States at this point. You kind of have to know what's going on, as it's going on. So that was alarming. Joe Biden, we know. I think that is going to be a serious look at. Does he have some kind of dementia? It is not inappropriate to ask these questions when he keeps making these amazing gaffes day after day after day, not even recognizing his own wife, can't tell apart his own wife from his sister, whatever that was about. So it's not just the age, it's about how they're holding up. And the 2 Democrats are not holding up. Trump, of course, looks like he has unlimited energy. As for the 2 white men thing, that's the thing that's holding the Democrats back. They got to stop focusing on this. We need a woman. We need a woman. Well, that really didn't help Elizabeth Warren, did it? Her campaign went down in flames because she focused on that way, way too much at the expense of the issues that should have been able to propel her to a much better showing.
Now, of course, Joe Biden, and we'll find this out soon now that he's considered to be the front runner to win the nomination of one of the 2 major political parties, that he not once but twice within a few months had brain aneurysms in the 1980s, and most any neurologist will tell you that that has a permanent impact on your mental functioning. That's the kind of thing that's going to come out. Probably not from Bernie, but if Biden gets a nomination, it'll certainly come out from Trump. Now, the delegate totals are less than 1/4 of what's needed to get the nomination, so it's now a 2-man race. 32 states, starting with 6 coming up Tuesday. Michigan, the big prize. Also, Idaho, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, and Washington. Is this sort of mini Super Tuesday more about delegates or more about momentum?
Well, I think it's both. I think Bernie can't fall behind too much. We know he's not going to win a brokered convention. He knows that. He's already thrown in and said if he doesn't have a plurality, just a plurality going in, he'll drop out. And that's just, he's got nothing to lose. If he doesn't have that plurality, they're not giving him the nomination, and he knows it. So that wasn't a bad thing to say. I don't think he can afford to have Biden racking up states much more. We know he's going to lose Florida on March 17th with all those delegates. That's going to hurt. And we know that's already going to happen. He cannot lose Michigan, in my opinion. He's got to keep it close in Michigan. It should be a state that plays to all of his advantages, working class people. It was the key state Trump took to take down Hillary in 2016. But again, have we seen it from Bernie? Can he go in and win a state? He's not an absolute lock-in as he was with New Hampshire and California. He needs to show that he can do that. He needs to show it fast. So I absolutely think Michigan on March 10th is crucial for him.
Well, lest we forget, Bernie had a big victory in Michigan in 2016 against Hillary. That sort of kept his campaign alive when it was starting to flag. So he's got a history there. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks a lot.
That is Joe Schaeffer, political columnist for LibertyNation.com. Quick break, and then we're back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner. This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Just talking loud, just saying nothing.
And now we welcome you to the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, the indispensable portion of the program entitled Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome back in our constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, and his most important yet unofficial title, our guardian of individual liberty, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Tim, if I win the Powerball lottery, in addition to my resignation letter, you will receive an offer as my official hype man going forward, okay? I appreciate it very much.
I think the official word is pitch man, but
pitch man. Okay. Yes. Either way.
All right. The Supreme Court is allowing the ban on bump stocks enforced by the Trump administration to continue for now.
That's right, Tim. When the Trump administration banned bump stocks, the number of folks ran to court to challenge that ban because it was done by an administrative agency, not by the Congress and passing a new law. And as part of that litigation, they've asked for a stay in enforcement of the law while the litigation goes forward. That was denied in the lower courts, and they went to the Supreme Court to ask, again, for a stay. That's what this case is. It's about whether or not the law will be able to be enforced during the time that the law itself is being challenged in the federal courts. And the Supreme Court declined to give that stay. But Justice Gorsuch, Tim, took the extraordinary step of writing a statement with that cert denial, is what we call it, denial of certiorari, or a refusal to hear the petition. And what he did basically say was it's hard to see how this could pass muster on the law itself. So it was a bit of foreshadowing how the court might treat the issue down the line. And I think it's a good thing that he has already telegraphed he's going to be skeptical of any decision that doesn't honor the individual rights of the litigants.
Now, just to be clear, at this point in time, it is illegal to possess a bump stock in this country. Is that correct?
It's a machine gun, according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives this month, Tim. A few months ago, it was perfectly legal. It was akin to having an apple or a piece of paper, no restriction whatsoever on it. And today it is a federal felony, and that's the purpose behind the litigation, and I think the purpose behind Justice Gorsuch's admonition to the lower courts.
Well, a lot of the attention surrounding the Supreme Court is on the issue of abortion and whether the Trump justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh will lead the charge in trying to essentially overturn Roe versus Wade. We don't have any answers on that yet. But there was quite a dust-up this week, Scott, with Senator Chuck Schumer making threatening remarks outside of the Supreme Court while naming and pointing directly at the court, naming Gorsuch and Kavanaugh.
The Senate Minority Leader was out front to attend a rally when the court heard June Medical Services v. Russo, which is a case about a Louisiana abortion law. And that's a fascinating case in and of itself, but the goings-on outside were somewhat interesting, with Senator Schumer saying that they would reap the whirlwind, they being Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, if they went ahead with, I guess, presumably some decision that the senator did not like. He has since said he meant that the Senate Republicans would pay a political price for his words, but that statement goes against the plain meaning of the language he used out front of the court, which said that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch would be the ones who would pay the consequences directly.
While he was pointing at the Supreme Court, he wasn't pointing at the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah.
He was pointing at the Supreme Court. So abortion is a hot potato in an election year. It's about as hot a potato as you can get.
Yeah, I do want to actually talk about the substance of that argument, because there's an interesting juxtaposition with the new justices, and one of the reasons why I think there is so much attention being paid. The case itself concerns a Louisiana law about abortion access, with doctors being required to have admitting privileges in local hospitals if they are to perform abortions. The Supreme Court struck down a similar law in Texas, and the Louisiana law is very similar, if not identical, but somehow the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that it was, in fact, legal, even though the court had overruled this Texas law. So the question is, did the court take this case in order to bat down an errant circuit, to say to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, you should have done a better job with this? Or perhaps is Chuck Schumer or are the pro-choice side right that the other justices see this as an opportunity to really make a dent in Roe v. Wade and perhaps dial back abortion rights significantly in this country? So it is a case that is worth watching, and we will be.
Now, let's move to Minnesota, Scott, where a bill would slash that state's power to take black kids away from their parents.
It's shocking, Tim. I just can't even believe it. So families if this bill passes, okay, the Minnesota bill would give families of black children additional rights against the state when it comes to removal of those children. And the question I would have is, why don't all children of all races, Tim, get this kind of protection? The bill minimizes the circumstances under which they can be placed in a foster care, including requiring that they can prove there's no extended family members who could care for the child instead of placing them in foster care. Doesn't that sound like a great benefit to children of brown, if you're Hispanic or white or Samoan or any other race that we can think of? Why should this be blacks? I mean, the idea is that there is a negative state action against black families and people, that they suffer undue discrimination, which I think is perhaps true. But also the remedies for those things can't be to give great protections for black people, but not include the rest of us in those protections. It should be to sort of lift us all, right?
I don't understand how you could pass a law that would single out one group of citizens over or under another. I don't understand how you could pass a law like that.
It seems like it would be illegal on its face, but yet that's what we have.
Okay. Here we are in 2020. Mm-hmm. Drone pilots say a new Federal Aviation Administration rule would ruin their hobby.
Well, this, Tim, I think kind of circles back around to that gun control discussion we were having with the bump stocks, which is that the Federal Aviation Administration is not a legislating body. They can't pass federal law, but they're proposing a rule that will require many drone operators to basically down their planes. They won't be able to operate them because it's going to require like a network kind of connection where they're sort of plugged into a network where they can keep track of them, as I understand the rule. But what it will do is the same way, just like the bump stock ban had the rule of, in addition to making people criminals if they retained their bump stocks, but they had to destroy their own property. And the same thing would be true for this drone rule. That it would be, these drones would essentially be worthless without significant modification. So I think it's another interesting case of legislating by a federal agency that's acting in detriment to the liberty of Americans.
Well, how to control the burgeoning drone traffic across the country is going to become a cutting-edge issue in the years ahead, no question. Finally, Scott, one more story from Minnesota. As a matter of fact, a judge in the Twin Cities, which would be Minneapolis and St. Paul, has ruled that those cities cannot force landlords to give tenants voting information.
I think this is an interesting story because it talks about compelled speech. It's a minor level compelled speech, to be sure, Tim. But these assaults on the First Amendment do come from government agencies at all levels. And here they want to encourage these folks to vote. And so instead of doing so on their own dime, they just offload it to a landlord. Like, why not? Let them do it. But it's compelled speech to tell somebody else that they should say to somebody else to go vote. In addition to the fact that it may be against their interests. I mean, you could think of, for instance, Jehovah's Witnesses who may have a religious objection to voting or advocacy for others to vote. That's just one of the small things that you can envision, which would be, a significant burden that this law meets. So it was thrown out and good riddance.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose with Mark Angelides, all available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Until then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.